Lucy Letby, serial killer. Why did she kill? Part 7. We continue an examination of the behaviours of Lucy Letby to seek insight as to what she is. Her trial lasted for 10 months, and there would be repeated opportunities to revisit the way that she conducted herself in court and examine those behaviours to gain further insight. That would, of course, lengthen this review considerably, and therefore a few instances have been selected instead which have proven useful with regard to the ongoing analysis. During her appearance in court, Letby came across as well-spoken and unflustered, thoughtful and cooperative. Was this because she genuinely wanted to help? Or was it simply that she wanted to project a facade in the courtroom, marrying that to which she had projected to the outside world hitherto? What was interesting from Letby's evidence is that there were certain phrases that she used repeatedly. When she was asked about the Facebook searches that she made for the baby's parents, she replied, "That was a normal pattern of behaviour for me." When asked about taking nursing documents home with her and storing them, "That was a normal pattern of behaviour for me." What's interesting about that, of course, is that undertaking the Facebook searches in relation to the baby's parents showed a lack of boundary recognition. She is there to do a job. She's there to care for premature babies. Whilst in that job one would expect that the nurse would be particularly understanding of the anguish and upset of parents dealing with a premature child or children, as it was often the case that there were twins and sometimes triplets in the neonatal unit. It would be expected that a nurse would create a bond between them and the parents, as the child could be on the ward for a significant amount of time. But that doesn't mean that they ought to become friends. It doesn't mean that the nurse is entitled to explore their personal lives beyond that which is volunteered to them by the parents as a consequence of their repeated attendance in the neonatal unit. And the fact that Letby found that it was appropriate for her to undertake these searches demonstrates a sense of entitlement and an absence of emotional empathy, along with poor boundary recognition. I will be returning to the significance of the Facebook searches in due course, but also the fact that she took documents home with her which she ought not to have done, and it wasn't one or two, there were many of these documents, which shows a lack of boundary recognition again, a lack of accountability for her behaviour, and a sense of entitlement to remove confidential documents and place them in a less secure environment, namely her home. Who knows who might view them there, as opposed to where they're kept in a hospital, they would only be viewed by medical staff. Interestingly, her response of, "This was a normal pattern of behaviour for me," is a form of deflection. She has enough about her to recognise that her behaviour is being criticised. And she has enough about her to recognise that what she had done was viewed as problematic. However, she essentially rejected any suggestion that she had done wrong by saying, "Well, it's normal for me." A slightly exaggerated but similar situation would be, for instance, saying to somebody, "You go around punching people in the face, that's not on," and the individual responds with, "That's a normal pattern of behaviour for me. Namely, you might think what I'm doing is wrong, but actually that's entirely normal for me, and because I'm special and important, and what I'm doing is normal, that means it's all right." It seems to me that here we have an interesting glimpse into a mechanism which is seeking to remove a potential threat to control. Letby faced relatively tame questioning, as you would expect from her own barrister, and then the prosecutor, Nick Johnson KC, took over. At first, it appears that Letby coped fairly well with the cross-examination. It's evident that she felt equal to her interrogator, of course, that exemplifying a degree of arrogance and haughtiness. And her knowledge of neonatal medicine was obvious. Occasionally, it can be seen from a reread that she veered on cocky, being arrogant. She disagreed with established nursing guidelines. The great Lucy Letby has come to educate us all, has she, that the established guidelines are incorrect and that she knows better. She disagreed with senior doctors and medical experts. There were even occasions where she sought to outsmart the barrister. Johnson, as the prosecutor, picked holes in her testimony, pointing out the differences between what she told the police after her arrest and what she was saying in court. He found examples of her disagreeing with herself, highlighting evidence she had previously agreed and was now disputing. Now, of course, some of that might be down to the fallibility of memory, but it also suggests that there is a revision of history taking place, that in a particular moment, it may well be that a certain mechanism on her behalf is seeking to nullify control by telling her, explain it's A. Then on another occasion, in order to protect her, she explains it as B. And then later on, somebody points out, you said A on that occasion, and later you said B. This is often behaviour that is associated with the narcissist, particularly those which are lesser and mid-range. The necessity of asserting control in the moment means that the narcissism selects an explanation. It doesn't matter whether it's true or not, as long as it nullifies the threat to control. On another occasion, the narcissist can give a different answer to the same question, and they fail to recognize that they're inconsistent because the narcissism doesn't allow them to see that they're inconsistent. All that matters is the nullification of the threat to control. Accordingly, in the circumstances, this repeated failure, where she demonstrated that she was actually disagreeing with herself, might be the compartmentalization of narcissism taking place, or, as mentioned, the fallibility of her memory. The barrister would say to her, "You're lying, aren't you, Lucy Letby? You enjoyed what was going on, didn't you, Lucy Letby?" "No," she would answer meekly. Her delivery around this time started to change. It was evident that the cross-examination was now starting to get to her. She became staccato and monosyllabic. Her voice level dropped to a whisper. And then, eventually, Letby asked to stop. Johnson had been asking her about each baby in the order they appeared on the charge sheet. It was only 4 babies in. But then Letby asked to stop. Might this be because it was actually too much for her, that her emotional empathy was struggling to cope? Or was this simply a situation where the cross-examination was proving too much of a threat to control, with the consequence that she then needed to try and halt it by, in effect, withdrawing from it? There were only a handful of other occasions where tears came to the surface, and in one particular exchange between her and the prosecution barrister, we have another moment of insight. During evidence about being taken off nursing duty, when excerpts of her post-arrest interviews were read out, it was mentioned she'd had suicidal thoughts, and then he asked a question about Letby. Johnson asked, "Is there any reason that you cry when you talk about yourself?" he asked, "but you don't cry when talking about those dead and seriously injured children?" This observation is particularly compelling. This might suggest that the tears are for herself, because she turns on the waterworks by pity play, And she doesn't cry for those that she had murdered because she simply doesn't care about them, because she has no emotional empathy. Letby's response was, "I have cried when talking about some of those babies." But whether that was accurate or not, we don't know. Certainly it wasn't the case in the courtroom that she cried when talking about the babies. She might have done elsewhere, or this might just have been a lie that was created in the moment to nullify the threat to control posed by the observation of the prosecutor. There's more evidence which we can examine in relation to Letby's behaviour. Pictures showed her drinking cocktails and partying on hen-dos with friends at the height of her killing spree. Two of the images were taken just hours before she murdered baby A in a neonatal unit of the Countess of Chester Hospital. As the child lay dying, his heartbroken mother pleaded with Letby, "Please don't let my baby die. Please don't let my baby die." In the images, Letby was at the front of the group and was pictured smiling with 16 friends at a hen-do in York on the June the 7th, 2015. The group visited a number of bars and later posed for pictures at the train station carrying pink balloons. The next evening, Letby returned to the Countess of Chester Hospital and injected air into the bloodstream of baby A, who weighed just 3 pounds and 12 ounces when he was born 12 weeks premature. On the one hand, some people might argue, well, she was able to do this because she was innocent. But she has been convicted, and therefore we proceed on the basis that those convictions are safe. Therefore, to be able to do this, to be able to go from partying and behaving in a seemingly normal way to then killing a child, suggests not necessarily that somehow she has snapped. There doesn't seem to have been a build-up of pressure, but rather that there appears to be a cold, callous individual, devoid of emotional empathy, who is readily able to compartmentalize. Ted Bundy was able to lead a relatively normal life in between the murders that he committed. And that is part of the compartmentalization that goes on. Contrary to what people might believe, the serial killer doesn't sit in a shack sharpening their knives and gibbering to themselves. They can appear to function like any other normal member of society. During a 12-month period, she went on to kill 6 more children in an attempt to kill another 6, and throughout that time, she lived a seemingly normal life, socializing with friends, betting on the races, and jetting off for summer holidays. This isn't an individual that is racked with anguish in relation to what she has done, but rather she commits a murder and then moves on, commits a murder and then moves on, suggesting that actually this is an individual who is quite easily able to compartmentalize with regard to the various aspects of her life, and somebody who's unaffected by the concept of guilt, conscience, or remorse. It might be suggested that there's the possibility that this has been suppressed as a consequence perhaps of some external stressor, but it would be certainly unusual for an individual to go so readily from enjoying herself to killing, with no other suggestion of any other problems, and for it to take place over such a long period of time. She was able to go to a wedding on the 31st of October 2015, grinning and posing for photographs, whilst just a week earlier she'd killed her 5th victim, baby I. 8 months later, and just hours after she had attempted to murder baby N, Letby and 2 friends flew out to the Spanish island of Ibiza during the height of the party season. In a message, as her holiday came to an end, Letby joked with friends that she would be back with a bang after a week enjoying the beach bars on Ibiza's stunning coastline. For 7 days, while Letby was enjoying the Balearic sunshine, there were no incidents on the neonatal ward, but within 72 hours of Letby's message, 2 baby triplet brothers were dead. On the day after one of the 3 identical triplets died, a colleague suggested she probably wouldn't want to go back to work. She replied with a sad emoji, "I want to be in Ibiza." The prosecuting barrister presented her with a file of messages and photographs together with her diary entries, explaining, "You were having a good time, weren't you? drinking fizz out on the razzle going to the races?" he asked her. Letby replied, "Yes, there were times over those years when I had good times." Again, demonstrative of the compartmentalization that she was able to engage in. Parents of two of Letby's victims said that the nurse behaved strangely as they spent their final moments with their murdered babies. The mother of a newborn girl who weighed about 1 kilogram at birth recalled Letby smiling and offering to take photographs as they bathed their daughter. She later sent the family a sympathy card and took a photograph of it on her phone. Might this be seen as just somebody that's caring, or is this too much? A level of involvement which is unnecessary. Another parent told the trial that a nurse he believed to be Letby interrupted their final moments with their little boy by trying to place him in a ventilator basket meant for dead babies, even though he was still breathing. She allegedly told the grieving parents, "You've said your goodbyes, do you want me to put him in here?" That seems like the behaviour of somebody who doesn't recognise, is unable to read the situation because of an absence of emotional empathy. It also shows poor boundary recognition and a sense of entitlement to treat the child like an object. Letby also made remarks described by the prosecution as portents of doom as some of her victims deteriorated. After her final murder in June 2016, she said to doctors, "He's not making it out of here alive, is he?" The days-old triplet boy died soon after. Letby, who was then in her mid-20s, had made similar comments in 2 previous murders. Was this Letby, acting with the knowledge of what she had done, wanting to demonstrate a form of power by almost prophesying that the child would die? Was it also the fact that she wanted to provoke a reaction from the doctors to see what they would say to her suggestion? More evidence of the way that Letby behaved, which starts to create a picture of who she is. In Part 8, we're going to examine the grievance that she brought and the fact that she managed to secure an apology from the hospital with regard to the allegations that have been made against her. Join me there.